I'm Mr. James.
And I'm Mr. Richie.
And we are
the
educators. And we're having some internet issues possibly on my part today. So if our voices or lips don't move when you hear something, then that's what's happening. It is December 10th. It is Thursday. It is still knee deep. I think we're waist deep in COVID, maybe up to past the belly button right now.
I'd say. Well, we are in one of the least affected states, just to put that out there. And so as a result, a lot of people are still not believing, that situation's that bad. And it feels like it was only yesterday that it was 30 people, 50 people a day.
Yeah.
And as of this week, the last week, 2,246 new cases in Maine just this week. And that's up twice as much from the previous week. So twice as many in 1 week. Not a good omen. So looking bigger perspective, United States, weekly increase of 1.5 million, where we didn't even have a million the previous week. So up by, times 0.5 basically. And then in the world, 4.3 million, up over 4 million the previous week. So everything is still on the incline. The numbers are growing. It is nuts. And we can see it closing in all around us. My own mom, my uncle's cousin's wife recently passed because of COVID. And we have a coworker whose childhood friend's parent just passed because of COVID. And it's like, we know people that know people. It's not going to be very long until we know someone.
It's like that's less than 6 degrees of separation, like they said. Everybody in the world is kind of related somehow, but it's really affecting people. It's all around us, and we have at least in our school, at least how we're following too. We have a good schedule for hygiene, PPE, taking care of everything. And we just have to be diligent about that and kind of wait to see what those in power above us are going to make a decision for when we go remote. Last week was all about, hey, we're going to get it soon. We're going to get the call, and we're still kind of waiting, but trying to protect ourselves.
It could be any minute. It could be literally just 1 minute you're in class, and then all of a sudden, news came in, pack up your stuff, head home. You should probably get a test and not talk to anybody for 14 days. And it's like, okay. Like, we're waiting for that to happen. And surprisingly, you and I, who see at any given time 1/4 of the population of the, hybrid learners, we have not been touched by this at all. And there's 2 other UA teachers that can't say the same in our school. And there's a whole handful of classroom teachers that can't say the same. There's a whole other handful of other staff members that can't say the same. And it's just like, me and you especially, we're just like, we know it's coming. Like me and you, especially because of this podcast, are paying such good attention to these numbers that like we're more aware than probably a lot of these people, because when you have conversations, they're just surprised to hear, like, oh, really? It's that bad? Yeah, it really is that bad. And we're just waiting for it to come and touch us. And it could be any time. So we're hoping that, these numbers go down sometime soon, but it's not likely. We're not really planning on that. So yeah,
it's a mess. I don't know, and that's the thing. I'm hoping we stay healthy. I'm just hoping that a decision is made to possibly go virtual soon, so that we can see if that can stop the numbers But I mean, we have to do that around the state. We could basically go remote, and then we could have the rest of the state, whatever, it's not real. And I'm gonna have to wear my mask. And then what happens is it keeps going up. And then we're like, wow, I guess we're not gonna go back to school. And maybe those that are at home and are not basically at school are now more apt to get sick because they're at home. So maybe being at school, we're actually protecting children from that.
That's a very good point to make, because truth be told, as far as public places go, an elementary school is definitely like one of the safest places to possibly be. And so we find ourselves working in an elementary school, and that's kind of a good thing to hear. We don't work in retail with all of these different people coming in, choosing to wear a mask or not. No, in our population, everyone wears a mask. We follow routines. As soon as every class leaves, doesn't even matter. Like today, it was like 20 degrees outside. I opened up the window, I spray the tables, I clean everything, close the windows, and we wear masks. I wear a KN95 when the kids are in there. I switch to a different one when I'm walking out and there's not people in my way, just to make sure that stays fresh. And we all have these routines and these things that we're doing. And like, you have a much larger classroom with much more, headroom for like viral load. So viral load appears to be one of those things that, is something to be aware of. And that's how many viral particles you intake. So it's not like, so basically everyone has at least one cancer cell in them every day or something on average, and our body naturally flushes it away if it's healthy enough. And that, same thing, we feel that COVID is in our rooms. It's just hopefully all these measures we take, it's not enough to get us sick. That's the way that you have to approach it. And so I think that was the big rise, was that not today? It's on the new the notes right there.
Oh no, yeah, it might not be.
Is there a big rise today?
I did think we've been up to. I think we did another 400 day, wasn't this? We must have talked about this earlier today. We had another 400 day. Or was it yesterday?
Right. So the first 2 days ever for the state of Maine to be over 400 people happened within the last 3 days. So yesterday was 405, and the day before that, I think it was like 420 something. And so, I mean, I show these stats to my older students, and just to try to get to them, that stuff is happening at a rapid pace. Yeah, 427.
427 today?
3 days ago. So
yeah, 405 and
427 3 days ago, 405 yesterday.
Yeah. So I'm not even seeing what it is today anywhere. I'm not seeing the numbers anywhere.
Not yet. I don't think it hasn't come out yet. So hopefully that's a good sign that it's not as big a number. Hopefully it's, because we're not hoping that this is spreading.
No,
it's just, we're realists. So, we're just, when you see the graph go like this, you don't think it's just going to immediately go back to normal. And it's just not the way it works. So, well, let's switch some gears here.
Yeah, I know. Let's get on to something that's, I don't know. I guess somewhat positive.
We do this every week.
We got a couple things that you're going to definitely hit upon that have to do with space, because you're the space person. Even though I'm trying to get myself ready for there, and I'm going to talk about face cancer, but it's going to be in Tasmanian devils, and it's highly contagious. So if you think about it, if a human gets cancer. If say, someone gets cancer and they come up to you and they bite you, you're not going to get their cancer. It's not going to travel over to you. In animals, it's different. In animals, they can give cancer that way. Cats get cancer from other cats.
That's incredible. I had no idea.
And animals like Tasmanian devils have this type of cancer growth that's been on their face, some of their faces. And if they get near others, they might fight and they might bite another Tasmanian devil, and it spreads. And they said, now this, even though it's highly contagious, they said it may not wipe out them, because they're thinking this cancer is actually going to get to a point where it's going to wipe itself out.
Wow.
It's going to be evolving where it says the tumor itself might eventually go extinct.
I have never, this blows my mind just from the fact that that one of the animals can bite the other and transmit through saliva, apparently, because I mean, I don't know whatever bodily fluid it could be, and a cancer. Like,
yeah,
my brain's already melting from that, so let alone like everything else. But wow. And the first sentence of that article is Tasmanian devils were supposed to be extinct by now. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I guess they're finding a way. Maybe it's they're just getting a way to their own bodies figuring out to do it. Because like now this next item, which I'm mentioning, and this kind of somewhat has to do with it, thinking that animals produce something that help protect them. They said some ticks actually protect themselves from our bacteria on our skin through a way of something that they produce that keeps our bacteria from hurting them. So they said it's an ancient bacterial gene that eliminates the microbes that are on our skin that basically are there to protect us.
Wow.
Which is pretty interesting because
that's incredible. I'm looking at it.
A tick's life is about sucking our blood and feeding on blood. And yet, our body's trying to protect us, and they found another way. You'd think, well, something could just attach to my skin, but your skin's covered in like bacteria. If anyone has ever wondered why they get that alcohol swab before they get like an injection.
The skin is like the reason why you have skin is to keep it out. It's like the best barrier, for that stuff. But it's like once it touches a mucous membrane, then that's how it all gets in. But it's amazing that so around 40 million years ago, there was a genetic modification that allowed them to be protected from these would-be microbial killers, is what the new study finds. So that's really interesting.
So we as humans need to find a stronger microbe to bathe ourselves in that they can't fight.
Yeah, right. That doesn't have any adverse effects. However, this one has had obviously hundreds of millions of years to adapt to humans. So I don't know if we're going to find anything new coming down the pike here. But around here in Maine, we have a huge problem with ticks. If I go out into my backyard on any given day in between May and September, I could go and pick up 1 to 2 ticks just by walking around the backyard for a few minutes. And we once took out a sheet. One of the tests that you do as like if you're like a field, like a forest person who studies forests, I can't think of the name right now. They go and take a white piece of fabric, a specific size, drape it over an area, they drag it for a specific length, and then they get a reading, like a count. That's how you do it. So we did that one time, and it was like 5 or 6 of them, because they grab a hold thinking it's humans or animals going by. And so anything that we could do to help kill off these things would be awesome. And I would not be sad to see them and mosquitoes wiped from the face of the earth. Yeah, personally.
Biggest disease carriers. I mean,
yeah, huge. And especially this summer, I was as afraid of Lyme disease as I was the coronavirus. And Lyme disease I've dealt with for like 5 to 10 years. We didn't have it when we were kids, but now it's here. But this year was the first time I'm like, yeah, I'm really worried about that and this other thing at the same time.
Yeah, I know, and it's Lyme disease is just one of the diseases they carry. There's like 5 of them or so. So
my grandfather got I can't remember what it's called. I think it's babyosis or something, whatever. And it's like it causes him to be allergic to red meat now. And, yeah, and so 93 years old, he had been eating red meat, and specifically a chunk of steak every Friday night, ribeye or something like that, every Friday night. And now it makes him break out. He goes into like just massive, like not shock, but just definitely an allergic reaction. And so at the veteran home where he lives, they said no more red meat for you. And so what a sudden culture shock for a 93-year-old man.
You're now vegan, enjoy hummus. And he's like, no. And then he lives to be 193. And he's like, that was the best choice I ever made.
But yeah, so, but yeah, I think we got some space to talk about here.
Yeah. So with the first one, which says enormous X-ray bubbles balloon from the center of the Milky Way.
I mean, there are so many structures in the universe that are so big that like you can't even really wrap your brain around it sometimes. And so, so they're talking about Fermi bubbles, which are like they're charged particles or plasma, which is what a star or the sun is made out of, but just gigantic. Like it's not like a function, like they're not a star. Like it's not a structure that is generating its own power, like it doesn't have gravity because it's not that tight, like a tight knit object, but it is a visible plume of electrically charged material, and a plume that is just enormous beyond the scale of human imagination, inside of one of the galaxies. And then you have, billions of galaxies out there. So it's still just scale that is almost hard to imagine. But basically we just keep looking and we keep finding that the universe is more dynamic and more strange than we ever thought. And it's awesome that we keep looking with the same tools and we keep finding new stuff. Like it's kind of like in the ocean right now, every time that somebody goes on a deep dive, they discover a new life form,
or something from the past that they thought was gone, and like, what? Oh no, we found all this now. And it's like you thought that someone had trolled over everything with a giant, like, whatever radar metal detector that can scan the bottom, but they don't actually make those.
They do. So like some people actually, off on the tangent, but like some people say, well, we've know more about the moon than we do the bottom of the the ocean. And it's like, it depends. It depends on the resolution you're talking about, because we have discovered 99, if not 100% of the ocean on a resolution of 1 kilometer, where if you're looking at an image, 1 pixel would be a kilometer. So everything has been mapped at that point. However, we have these really powerful spacecraft that are around terrestrial planets like Mars that can map way easier, way better than looking through a couple miles of water. And so it's harder to get a good reading on the bottom of the ocean than it is land. And so there's a lot of things about that, but like, no matter where we keep looking, whether it's in the bottom of the ocean or out into the cosmos, we keep discovering these new structures and forms and things. And so each one gives us a few more clues about how life, or even the universe itself, was started, or what creates, or what causes pressure to make things change. And this is just another one of them: giant X-ray bubbles in the middle of our galaxy, at least. I'm sure many others.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And I guess our Earth is headed towards a giant supermassive black hole in the middle of our universe. I keep seeing that, although we shouldn't be afraid of it.
We can't see it because it's occulted by the dust cloud and debris in our solar system. So sometimes if you look out into the night sky, you're looking like into the heart of our galaxy, but you don't know it. And we can't see all of the action happening because of how much dust and dirt and just things that are out there blocking light. And we have measured that there's a supermassive black hole, basically like a tub drain, with all of us spiraling around it. The only difference between the tub drain analogy and the galaxy reality is that the things on the outside spin at the same speed as the things on the inside, which creates the dark matter problem. But that's a it's getting into it, but still, yeah. There's we are circling the drain essentially of this massive black hole that will pull everything in until it's spaghettified and destroyed and turned into something else. Kind of like how we die and then become food for something and become something else. So it's basically planets and stars can be pulled into it, destroyed, stripped apart, but recreated into like energy rays. They get blasted back out into the cosmos and coalesce into something else.
Now we got about we have like, a few billion years until that happens. So I think we're, I think we're good. We'll find our way out of this.
We have to be a multi-galactic species at that point, or at least a multi-stellar. We don't have to be multi-galactic at any time soon. But however, Andromeda is a galaxy that's colliding with the Milky Way. So there is a point in time where it might be really sketchy to be living anywhere in either of those two galaxies. So.
And we'll escape them. We'll escape them.
Yeah.
As long as the sun that's launching this explosion of electromagnetic energy towards Earth doesn't affect us before that.
Yeah, it won't be too bad. So happens all the time. And I know every time that it happens, they make a big deal out about it. And it's a good point because there's a very real chance and it's a very real probability that one of these coronal mass ejections or geomagnetic storms, there's a bunch of different names for the same thing. Basically the sun popping, like when you have a campfire, everything's fine and serene, and then all of a sudden it pops.
Yeah.
Right. It pops. And like sends a charged piece of wood towards you or something, and that's just that's the way the sun works. And one of them happened to pop and head towards Earth, and it's gonna be fine. This one's gonna create big northern and southern lights.
Yeah.
For basically, that's where the protection from radiation ends. And so if you see northern lights, you're getting a big dose of radiation that you normally wouldn't. Part of the part of the show, I guess. You
That's so doused. Pretty. That's so pretty. Yeah. Ooh, I feel hot, like I've got a tan or something.
Yeah. So this one won't be a big deal, but if we have learned anything of 2020 is that coronavirus has really ravaged our life. It has changed the way that we could even imagine life. And a year ago, 2 years ago, especially, we would never be able to say, all right, there's going to be something coming down the pike that's going to really change our life. Well, a real electromagnetic storm, like a real coronal mass ejection pointed at just the right angle, could devastate an entire hemisphere. So it depends on what part of the Earth has daylight when it hits, but it has happened before, and luckily the last time it happened, we only used what did you call it, like telegraph machine. Yeah. So the telegraph wires burned because of all the electromagnetic, like it blew transformers and did all kinds of stuff, wiped out a whole bunch of that stuff. But like that was almost 150 years ago or something, and so we're due for another one. And if it comes, we're going to be out of internet for weeks. We're going to be out of electricity for weeks. And if coronavirus has sent us into any sort of disarray, I think all of a sudden dropping internet and electricity for weeks on end across an entire hemisphere, I think that would cause a massive panic beyond anything we've seen in the last year.
It's going to turn into The Road, and even though I read The Road, I didn't get much out of it. So it's survival. It's survival. What do you think? Time.
Can we watch the movie and get the same amount?
Yeah. It's going to be bad.
Yeah. Well, someday it's going to happen, and that's anybody that knows what a Faraday box is. That's a lot of people are buying them right now, and I've heard it's another story that people buy a Faraday box, which is basically just a metal box to put a device in. So if this is in a Faraday box, if it's surrounded by metal, it won't conduct the electromagnetic pulse from either a nuclear blast or a coronal mass ejection, which I was just talking about. But people put their Wi-Fi routers in those metal boxes and then wonder why they don't get Wi-Fi signal. That's just something I saw on the news.
I saw the whole thing. Like, wait a minute, why am I not getting that? Yeah, you're not getting that because it's okay.
It's not a one-way mirror there.
Yeah. Well, so today we wanted to do something different and just kind of like a positive thing, or at least describing who we are, what we actually do. We described this before, like in the first episode, and we mentioned what we do for work and why we are the educators, but we want to go a little bit more into that. That's why I wanted to call this episode What We Do and Why We Do What We Do. So I don't know if Mr. Ritchie wants to start with this, but like, what do you do? Why do you do it?
Well, so I have a background in science and education. And so I combine the two in this job that I have now. I teach STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And we are a unified art. So that means that students that go to this elementary school have a classroom that they're in for the majority of the day. And for a portion of their day, a half an hour this year, they come in and they stop by my classroom. And I teach them lots of STEM-oriented things. So first trimester, so trimester broken up into 3 pieces, or a year broken into 3 pieces. First one, I taught engineering. And when you're talking about kindergartners and 6th graders, or the spread of kindergarten through 6th graders, engineering doesn't mean we're going out and building giant structures and functional things. I'm teaching the ground floor, the basics of kindergartners, dexterity. Yeah. Using their mind and their hands at the same time, showing them pictures, showing them videos, and getting them building experience. So like we talk about how bridges are made, or what a tower is. So with kindergartners, sometimes they don't know how to build up in 3 dimensions. They can build, they color wide or tall, but they don't do the building up. And well, that part of the brain usually isn't really activated at that point until you make it activated. So I demonstrate how to build up in 3 dimensions. Basically with kindergartners, keep them busy and keep them thinking about building, and that's it pretty much. So then I also teach computer science. I teach everything from coding, the hardware. I take computers apart and show kids what the guts of a computer looks like. I teach like the forces, so how things fly, how things how things fall, so parachutes, things like that. I try to throw in space, astronomy, and things like that. However, my curriculum is sometimes really structured towards engineering and computer science. But I also am sort of I'm an introductory lesson to the trades. And so I have a history in trades prior to being a teacher. And that's one of the reasons why I got the job, is that I'm sort of like an introductory lesson of the trade. So not everybody's cut out to be a philosopher, not everybody's cut out to be a lawyer. Sometimes we've got to have people that build and repair. It's just something that we need to have in our society. And so I'm trying to help kids that could be interested in those things find where their passion meets their need for being independent someday. And so I try to inspire kids to think about what their passion is. And someone like me, when I was a kid, was cars. And I naturally graduated into becoming a technician. I sold parts for a long time. I worked on electric cars. So it was sort of like this gradual thing. And I hope to inspire kids to build things and become, the future of science and engineering in America. And so, but what I also feel is part of my job is helping to correct the gulf of science information. Like the lack of science education, I think, is holding us back, like in this current situation of like the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And so I feel the biggest part of my job is to get children to understand what science really is, that it's not just learning facts and knowing stuff about the world, but in fact a way of thinking, being critical, being aware, listening to people that have experience versus people that are just coercive, people that have a reliable background, like the scientists. When I talk about coronavirus, I say that we need to listen to medical professionals because they're the ones that are in it. When you go to build a house, you don't ask a auto mechanic how to build a house. Sure, he might have some ideas, but he's not, or she is not specifically trained in this arena. And so therefore you go and seek out the professionals or whatever arena they are in. And you know, with sixth graders, you can have these conversations. Some people think a sixth grader isn't capable of thinking of really complex thoughts. However, for us that work with them, you can be incredibly impressed, and a sixth grader might be forming the groundwork to, in middle school and high school, become someone that can outperform people in their 20s and 30s. And I don't think that anything incredible is going to happen in elementary school. It's incredibly rare for something like that to happen. But I feel that I'm planting these seeds of science and technology in these kids, that someday they're going to go, oh my God, all this makes sense now, thanks to Mr. Ritchie. And that's really what I'm doing, is I'm trying to make the world better by creating more scientifically literate children. And I do that 600 kids at a time. So that's my pitch.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because in ninth grade, I was, I went to a school that actually had one of these classes we had to take, which is just different trades, and you could just select something you want to try out. I want to try being an electrician. And I actually went through and did so many different things, from wiring up circuits. You know, I had to make my own. I had an entire, basically I had to wire in a light, but they gave us the actual everything. We literally had to plug it into the wall to make it work, and I made it work. And I had a number of other things I had to do with some old school programming of actually moving wires between transistors and things like that. But it actually, that person goes, "You're really good. You should be an electrician." And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, because, you know, up through 8th grade, it wasn't anything like that. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in that. And then of course, 10th grade rolls around and stuff, and I'm playing in some bands and stuff like that, and starting to play music a lot. And I'm like thinking back, like, yeah, that could have been a trade for me. I was really looking into that, but that interest in science has always been there for me. And I've always been interested in quantifying the world. Math has been my first love, and I used to read math books as like a hobby. And I thought math could solve everything. Basically, if there's any problem in the world, you just have to know harder math, you know, more complex math to figure it out.
And honestly, that is not inaccurate. There are so many people that think that they could even figure out the human psyche with the appropriate math. And there's people working on that project. So no, I mean, anything other than sentient beings that have the ability to make decisions, everything else in the universe is solved by math. So there's that.
So my little story. So I'm the music teacher at that same school that Mr. Ritchie's at. And yes, music. And you've seen before, those that have watched this before have seen, I have a piano behind me. I have guitars in the corner. Yeah, I've been doing this for quite a while. I've been playing music, well, since I was 6. So quite a few years, over 30 years. And I've also been playing professionally for over 20 years. Actually, I think one of my first gigs was in 1998 or 97, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, so when I actually got paid to play something, and then I was like, okay, great, this is what happens. Great, I can use what I've been doing for years and get money. Yeah, okay, let's do this. So I kept doing that, and if a virus wasn't around now, every weekend, if not, pretty much every single weekend, because I had at least one band that was set for that, I'd be having a gig. And yeah, it'd probably be a little bit harder to do what we're doing right now for this podcast, vlogcast sort of thing. But yeah, for a while I just did that. I basically taught music lessons. The day I graduated from my school with my first degree, well, my second degree, my bachelor's degree, I went that day to a music store and started teaching lessons. And I did that for 13 and a half years. But I did that while I was working other jobs. And then it came to a point where I had this opportunity to get into a school to teach and music. And I figured I couldn't be running those two things because this actually involved a lot more time than before. Before I could teach lessons at a certain time, and the rest of the time I could be doing something else. And it's also good to have insurance and things like that, right? Adult things.
Yeah.
So my idea for music even when I had private lessons, and at one point I had 67 students each week, 67 individual people, half-hour lessons each week. It was pretty crazy to have that many people. That didn't stay for that long, but because the summer would have like an influx of students, and then the fall you'd lose a number of them. But I average around 45 for like at least 10 years. But my whole idea was always that music is integral to someone's psyche, and music is motion. So we move. We're alive. We are cells moving in our bodies. We have a heartbeat. It's not going to stop. You don't want it to stop. It stops, you're not around anymore. So we have this beat. We have to move, and maybe playing an instrument or making music through your whatever means possible. That's your way of getting out your emotion. And basically, and when I say emotion, and then I also could say emotion, because if you think about it, we can use our feelings in this way to convey, especially for those that don't want to use words. So, and I always took a scientific approach to music, whereas, how do I do this? How do I do that? Well, let's think about it. What am I physically doing? When you see me play the guitar or whatever, what am I physically doing? See, I have my hand like this. I have my other hand like that. I'm picking down on the string, and I'm trying to match the same string in my other hand, and you see how it's happening. So I explain things to students like that. I want them to understand that why things had to happen. So it wasn't just a random, hey, just do it this way, don't question thing. No, question everything and look everywhere to find better ways to do something, because you always want to find a better way to make yourself more efficient. Now, when I came to the school, my way of thinking about music was in this scientific way, but also that I wanted to do a lot of movement. I've been dancing for many years, ballet for over a decade, and ballroom dance for around 10 years. And I even taught ballroom dance for many years as well. And so I can use dance, and I can use that idea of like sensing beat and rhythms and such in my classroom. So I've been doing it that way and trying to get students to move, so that if they can get this kinesthetic awareness of music, then it's going to be easier for them when I put something out in front of them to like, oh, I know how to read that. So that's just my way. And basically our standards for music teachers are to get students to read standard music notation by whatever means possible.
I've never been able to do.
Yeah, and my way is if they can feel it, then when they look at it, they can eventually take that feeling, and that can be represented in a symbol. And so that symbol, if they can feel that pulse of that rhythm, then they can understand it on a greater scale, because the greatest musicians are, when they're looking at something or they're trying to figure out someone's notes on how to play something, which should be written music, they have to, if you don't feel it, they're not going to actually give a good representation of how to play that. They don't
Right.
feel that in them. And that's something that I don't see a lot of teachers teaching. They don't put that. It's about, can you recite back to me something I told you how to do? Rather
Yeah.
than, can you feel this and take it in for yourself? And however you are able to perform it or show me how you understand it, that's good enough. And that's how you're going to be able to experience music at this point. You're going to get better and more broad at understanding different areas to do, but that's initially right now how you're able to experience music. And kindergarten through sixth grade, they definitely want to move, and movement is a major thing. So for me, I do a lot of movement in my classroom this year. I went back to the basics and I said, well, we can't have instruments. There's very limited instruments. I have to buy them for the students. We cannot sing. We can't do our movement activities where we're moving in outside of our own space. We can't pass instruments and do passing games and group games, which is a major component of elementary music teaching, as well as, singing folk songs and learning melody and harmony from that. So I said, we're going to go right back to basics with making body percussion. So using our bodies as percussion instruments. And I've done it that way. And everything I've done since then has been through that lens of motion and using our body, of making sound, to be able to take, if I'm giving them an egg shaker, however they're shaking it is that's very similar to them snapping. If they're shaking against their hand, they're clapping. If they're shaking against their leg, they're patting. If they're shaking with two hands towards the ground, it's just like they're stomping. And I'm doing that with every instrument I give them, and I'm teaching them how to make instruments. So it's this idea of just, you're making music, you're making it more something that is part of your life rather than something that's outside yourself that you just can know. Oh, I can know music. Oh, I know that, but I don't really care about it. That I don't want that to happen for students. I want them to get invested in something physical that they can do, which is a great start, I think, in anything, and then turning that into knowledge.
I love that like music class is so I like that music is so built into our culture that we have made efforts to include it, because in elementary school, in education as a whole, because even though I never participated in elementary school, we had a music teacher that would stop by on a cart, and have us sing some strange songs that I didn't know. I couldn't carry a tune. I didn't know pitch. I didn't understand any of it. It didn't work. It didn't work with me. I did want to play the viola once. I remember seeing the viola and I was like, you know what? I want to play that thing. And then I found out they were $300 or something back then. And I was like, that's too much. My parents would never buy one. Erase that dream from my memory. And I grew up, and around my early 20s, about 23, 24, I learned the guitar and bass, and I've developed a appreciation for music since. But it's like, man, if I had someone that could teach me that music was something that you feel, that is a part of you, rather than, like you said, this external thing that you just do or whatever, that would have been seriously influential. So yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Well, I want students to can make music out of anything, everyday items, or however, if they're listening to something and, hey, I can do this. And because we do have computers now, we can make music with computers. We don't have to actually hold a traditional instrument or think of music in a certain way. If we can arrange sounds in something that pleases us, whether it be something for like ASMR, which is really popular on YouTube, or just putting beats together just to put behind a YouTube video we might make or something like that, which students are talking about all the time. It's just a way you have an ear for arranging things to make an environment or an experience that you want others to understand. And that's, I think, every musician wants to do that anyways. We hear something, we try to recreate what we hear in our heads, and then we want to present it to somebody else, and hopefully they have a very similar reaction. At least we're hoping, because that means you understand them. And I think everyone's looking for that. And I'm just trying to strip it down to the level where everybody can do this. It's not, you have to work hard to get to this certain level, because, you know, that certain level is just someone who's worked hard in a certain style or on a certain journey where they've been able to do something that maybe a greater audience understands. Right now, maybe a lot of people aren't understanding what someone's doing, and they're going to get to that level eventually where maybe those others can understand it, or they might try to reach up to some standard that was set a long time ago. But there's so many different standards. There's never one standard. So that's my way of thinking about going about this. I just want to keep it open for everybody. And the more I do that, the more actually I don't mind teaching music and not science or psychology, which I'd feel probably more comfortable talking about, considering the fact that everything is science. I mean, I include it in with music as much as I possibly can, and because I want them to ask why this, why that, and I throw in some history, but I don't hit on any one of those two things, because you can get lost in music history, you can get lost in the science behind music theory and why this works and that, and you can also get lost in just talking about instruments and all these weird things humans have come up with to make different sounds, you know, and there's nothing that relates to someone who plays some instrument that is like rare. Like I currently have a Renaissance lute built from fashioned after an instrument that was painted and sketched in the 1540s, basically, in like Germany. And it's a Renaissance instrument. It was handmade from someone in London, a group that makes instruments in London. It took me 2.5 years to get it. It cost quite a bit of money to have this, especially because I had to wire money out every now and then. And I'm one of a few people in the state that actually play this instrument. And I haven't played it in a little while. And yet next week, I'm going to be sharing it for all the students. This week has been classical guitar. But I want them to see that. I want them to say, hey, this is something different, but it doesn't matter, because I can hear how Mr. James is playing that. That's the same rhythm that I can tap with my hands, and I can relate to that, rather than, oh, I have nothing to relate to that person playing that weird alien instrument. Nope, you have everything to relate to me. This is just something throughout history that was made. It's got strings, whatever. Awesome. Find some strings. It's honestly, when I play something, it's about me being comfortable, what I can do with it, and if I can't do a lot with it, it's gone. And even that lute, I've tried to sell that thing a couple times, and no one's willing to pay me at least,
what it's worth,
a portion of what it's actually worth. And it's not worth it if I'm not going to sell that for anything less. So I can get.
There was about, I think, a day or two that I put my favorite guitar that I own up for sale, and it's a Gretsch ProJet hardbody with a Bigsby, and I had wanted that guitar. I saw it and immediately threw $500 at the first person I saw that had one, got it, played in a band. We lost a bass player, and so I stepped into the bass player role, and that thing has literally sat in the case for the last 10 years that I've been playing bass. And as a result, I've lost almost all of my guitar chops, and I have specifically been playing a 5-string bass. And so I am now in, like, the only thing that I know, because the only thing that I've been doing is 5-string bass with, like, a specific set or whatever. And I think that, like, the lack of experience with other things has held me back kind of in the last 10 years. And, like, I imagine if I ever walked by my music teacher playing a lute at one point, perhaps it would have been like, what is that thing? Why does it sound like that? It sounds so much different than a guitar, but it looks very similar you know, like it could have, you know, I saw a broken lute once at the last place I had roommates. Me and my now wife lived in a house with a bunch of people, and one of them had a lute that the neck had snapped or whatever. And so who knows, you know, the history behind it, but it was this beautiful instrument that was now just display basically. And I had always been inquired about, you know, wondering about it. And it didn't have strings, of course, they were all broken. And but to see a lute in action, to see, like, you played bass, I think, a little while ago. You played rock guitar. You've played a couple of other instruments.
Blues guitar.
Blues guitar. Yeah, exactly. And
piano.
So, yeah. And so once a week, 600 students walk by Mr. James playing a different instrument. And I think that makes a pretty big impact. I don't have any flashy, cool things like that. Last year, I launched rockets in my class, and that was my sort of, you know, my grand celebration or whatever. And I luckily was able to get all of the rockets in, 31 different rocket launches for all of the different classes, K through 6, just before March 13th or whatever it was when coronavirus hit. Yeah, and so it was like the last thing I did prior to whatever we were trying to do this spring and summer, and here we are. So how's the pandemic been to you as a music teacher?
Yeah, I mean, I like the way things are going. I think I like the fact that I changed how I've done things, but I know students are missing out on singing. I want them to sing at home. I encourage them to sing, and they still show me videos of them singing and singing along to some of the things, because I do send music out that they can sing along to as well. I just want them to think in terms of rhythms and getting that beat, that internal beat that we all have, you know, to feel that. But at the same time, yeah, I'm doing as many things as I can to just get them involved. And I like the fact that I can respond to them online. I like the fact that I can play music for them. That's something I couldn't be able to. I could do that in my classroom, but there's nothing worse than asking for 5, 6, 7 minutes of attention to listen to someone play music. I know how hard that is when kids want to move. And that's why I want to do it as they're walking by me in the hallway.
They're moving,
in a corner.
Yeah.
They can move, they can look at me. Some will stop and just stare and go, what is that? And I can talk with them, you know, while I'm playing.
Yeah.
And some will just, oh, well, you know, some background stuff. But I can rely on that if I see them and they go, what was that instrument you were playing in classroom? I say, well, that was called a lute. And then I can maybe give a little bit of information, and that might spur something. But it's the fact that I just want them to be, you know, have that ability to be around that sort of thing, be around a performance, be around someone actually physically playing an instrument and having that dexterity to do that sort of thing. So they can just, so maybe it kind of rubs off on them that, oh, look at, that's pretty cool, I guess, you know?
I think that those little events, especially at this age, they're so inspired by these short bursts of newness, of something new that could send them off in the appropriate direction. I think that our job as educators is to expose them to as many different styles of our particular flair as possible. So like I flew rockets, I fly a drone in the classroom, I fly it over each kid to blow their hair back, literally. And I fly it literally over each kid, fly it over around, I do some flips, I do this thing, and I tell them the whole end result is there's a computer inside that can actually fly this better than me. I'm just pushing some sticks, telling it where to go, but it's thinking and doing this stuff. They walk by you and they're seeing these new things. I mean, I never knew what a bass guitar was until I was in my 20s. I didn't know that it was different. I watched hundreds of rock videos in my teens and never understood the difference between a bass guitar. I never saw the difference between the two. And you know, a guitar, a regular guitar, bass guitar, and boom, the kids see it right there. You know, so I think that ultimately what we are doing is trying to provide our students, our 600 students or so, with as much culture, as much history as we possibly can, but also let them know that music is an important part of life, and that science, technology, engineering, and math is kind of how the world works. And we try to impart our knowledge on the future generation for the benefit of all mankind.
That sounds like a perfect place to end. Well, I'm Mr. James.
And I'm Mr. Ritchie.
And we are the educators. Stay alive, everybody, please. Wear your masks. Bye.
Social distance.